strategy, right? So we actually started out with service operations, right? Why we do that? Because I think most of us are doing daily operations, right? Daily operations, the core business of the company. Okay, like for example, I already mentioned me as a lecturer, teachers, right? My daily our school's business model is actually education, right? Providing education to the public, to the students, to even working adults. So, but to sustain the operation is our daily routine, right? So that's what we covered in the last week. Okay, service on daily operation stuff. Okay, to move on up is the next one is actually the service transition. So they will talk about service transitions. So what exactly is service transition is basically encompassing changes. Okay, in any business running, okay, you are going to expect change. Right? Change is a constant. It's always changing and changing. But there's always new upgrade. There's always new system to introduce. There's always modification to your business process through different cycles also, etc. So there will always be a lot of changes. So how do we manage this transition from the old system to the new system? How do we do it in a seamless way and to be able to still maintain the business objective or even better productivity or give better customer service, right? So what we are looking at in this particular module is always about value, to bring value, to be able to maintain the customer satisfaction. Right? How do we achieve that? To start a business is not easy. To even maintain and make the business sustainable over the years, that's even more challenging. Right? To be able to constantly provide business and to be able to make the mark, okay, to meet the customer's needs and wants. Okay, so today we'll look at the service transitions. We basically try to realize what are the changes. We plan for the new services that we want to introduce. It could be like our school, we introduce a new diploma, a new course, right? So that is also a new changes, and that involves a new curriculum, new kind of teaching, new lab, for example. There must be new course material to develop, or we might even have to engage new lecturers to come in to teach, right? If our internal organization doesn't have the capabilities, right? So we might need to recruit new staff, right? New staff with that experience, especially when we are teaching in poly. We really need a lot of industrial experience, right? So we need how to manage that change. How do you manage that? So that is what we are looking at today, right? So change is a constant, can be expected in any business, and like I say, it's always change for the better or change to reduce the cost, right? And hopefully by doing that, okay, or reducing manpower and more digital automations, how do we minimize the impact to existing services, right? So for example, you have been taking appointment manually, then suddenly you automate and people are allowed to order food or even make an appointment online and through electronic means, right? So how do you manage between some people do a manual registration by calling in, and people who basically book an appointment using whether it's a restaurant appointment or medical appointment or any appointment, right? So how do you manage between the manual process and also the automated process, right? So that you can still be able to manage, not like some, in our canteen. At one time, our school canteen actually have a self-service kiosk, right? Just like the McDonald's or KFC nowadays, they have the self-service kiosk, but then they also got the manual counter, right? So how do you manage that two counters, right? Especially our canteen, they are always lack in manpower, and we know some of those old auntie, uncle, they're not that digital savvy, so they might miss out some of the people who actually go to the self-service kiosk and order some of the, let's say, chicken rice, okay, and then they miss some of the electronic order that came in, right? And they're supposed to serve those electronic orders as well. But then you got somebody who just walk in or just come into the queue and try to order food directly right in your face. So how do you handle that? Right? Are you supposed to handle the electronic one, which is supposed to be quicker and priority queue, right? And you miss out on that. Okay, so there's all this management, okay, changes involved, and both as a manpower, as a way of managing your businesses is very important, right? To be able to prioritize. So you have to ensure that you also don't uh, dissatisfy the customers, right? So at the end of the day, it's about bringing value, right? With all these new changes to come in, we want to improve customer satisfaction or improve productivity or make things more efficient and more effective, right? Uh, so there are many changes that could involve, right? Even lecture, right? So we used to conduct lectures face to face. Then suddenly we have to change. We have to make an overhaul and everything go online, go digital, right? And last time we just deliver the lecture simply. Now we have to do recording. After recording, sometimes we have to download the lecture. So there are many things that you need to manage and processes, and how you're going to upload your video to appropriate places, etc. So extra work, extra things, but then there's some advantages to it. Like some students will miss out the lectures, right? They can review the lectures, right? Or even those who have attended, they might be able to review the lectures at their own time, own pace, right? So there are some convenience that actually been brought about. These are also digital disruptions, right? Some people like it, some people don't like it because there's a lack of touch, right? Especially for the lecturers, right? Seriously, like I say, we are always like, I hope, okay, I hope after this whole module, okay, some of you will still remember me, or some I might not be able to remember most of you, right? Seriously, compared to if I deliver the lectures with a face-to-face, I get to see the students face-to-face, right? I get to see them, their reactions. But when you speak over the Zoom, and and of course, I don't want to get every student on their video, right? So that I can see your face. Hey, last time I used to do that, okay, but I find that it's not productive, and even then, my screen is not big enough to see all the students, okay, especially now we have about over 20 students, right? So how do I go crowd that? And while I'm lecturing, I couldn't be toggling to look at all the students and see whether they are listening to me or not listening to me. So at the end of the day, actually, I didn't really know you guys. So that is some of these disadvantages where there isn't much of this human to human kind of relation or bonding, okay, that might have been built upon, okay, if we have a physical lectures. But we just have to make do with what is. But the good things, of course, there's also other advantages, okay, at the cost of this human bonding, right? Students have the convenience, right? And you don't have waste time traveling, okay, to school, okay, and you are able to when the class ends, you'll be able to be at your home, at the comfort of your home, without having to travel all the way. I know some of you like stay in very Jurong East, very far. So can you imagine if the class ends around 9:30, 10 something, some of the students might take 1 hour to travel back, right? So these are give and take.
So as you know, service transitions is about change, right? Especially in this age of disruptions. We need to know how to manage change, especially when changes is inevitable. So why is change important? Change are important because it can respond to ever-changing business need, and having to implement this change will be able to meet some of the customers' new requirements or new ones, and we are able to fulfill some of the agreed service requirements, and this will constitute in terms of customer satisfactions, improvement of customer services. Sometimes change are required in order to meet governance, in order to meet some of the legal contractual obligations that is required. So it's important that we need to know how to handle such changes. A service change could include new additional service that is required to put in, as well as even modifications of services in order to improve customer satisfaction. It could also include removal of some obsolete services, and that can have an impact on the IT services that you are providing. And when it comes to this, the scope will include configuration items, the processes that are in place that need to be changed, the documentations, the menu that has to be rewrite and reworked. These all constitute in what we call the service change or service transitions. Right? Take for example, in the mobile technologies, transformation has been ongoing. Mobile phones has evolved from 1G first generation phone to 2G, 2.5G, GPRS, GSM phones, and now we have got the 3G, 4G, and the fifth generations technologies coming up. So you can see changes is constant.
Service transitions. So in service transition, wherever there's changes, you need to manage it. You need to ensure that changes takes place properly as planned, right? And there must be appropriate change requests, right? You don't just because the client asks you to change the website or the client suddenly say, hey, can you give me another page or give me another report, where it might not be in the requirements, right? So you might need to ask them, hey, you need to raise appropriate change request, and then approval must be given, and we need to assess the risk on our side. If we were to change the program, if we were to add in extra pages, will there be any extra causes and all these things? So those has to be considered, right? And we also going to look at what other extra services or requirements is needed, right? And we also need to, for any new changes, there will be new gadgets maybe, right? So for example, we introduce automation. So maybe student attendance, now you can scan your card instead of looking at your face one by one to take attendance manually. So if you have that kind of automations in taking student attendance by scanning card, then you might have those hardware. You might need to incorporate those hardware. So you need to have that configurations hardware, what kind of hardware is required and what program is required. So both hardware, software, and also even the manpower to maintain such a system. So all this has to be in place in proper. Why do we need to have all these service assets and configuration management? Why? Because in the event that I want to repeat the same IT, right? Repeat the same automation. Maybe, for example, let's say the lab. Okay, the lab has if you go back to our lab, okay, there's actually a contactless card, right? So before you enter the lab, you have to scan the card before you go inside the class, right? So we can actually use that as an attendance, right? So what happens if we have one lab that can do automation in attendance taking by scanning card. Then if we want to replicate it to another lab or another 20 labs, we need to know exactly what is the hardware and software required, right, to scan the card, to have the card reader, contactless card reader to be mounted, and what version of the software is it running on NT or XT or 2000 server at the back end, and where is the database and the authentication, all these things. So all this has to be reset up. So the thing is, if you don't have all these service assessment configuration management in place, you might not be able to replicate another system to another place or replicate it to a lot of systems. So that is also very important, right? So you need to know all this, right? So there must be some. So whenever there's new changes, new updates, okay, you need to have that. And of course, when during transitions, you need to have a way to deploy deploy the system, right? You need to have a parallel deployment where you might have the old system still running, and the new system running in parallel, right, or in phases, or you want to launch it all together, which means that the moment you launch it, the old system is immediately obsolete, right, and the new system will just roll out completely. So that is the big bang approach, which can also be dangerous, right? So these are all things, okay, where we talk about the testing phases, or right, and also lastly is the management, service knowledge management. This is also very important, right? You must be able to have the proper training documentations whenever you have new system, okay, new processes. You need to train people. You need to document, okay, all this so that it can be trained, right? And people who leave the company, they might be able to rely on the manual to be able to take on the new changes, right? So these are the flow. So basically, it's like a project management kind of thing. You definitely need a project management whenever there's any change. So here could be the change management. You manage the change. It doesn't mean that the client always asks some changes. You will have to change, right? You have to evaluate at your site whether it's going to you need to charge them or not to charge them, right? If a customer keep asking for changes and you do it for free, then your business going to go bust, right? And you also got to evaluate the risk, right? How much man hour do I have to put in? So you can also approve, you can also disapprove, okay? And you also need the approval, okay, of your management, okay, your directors. So you need to evaluate the changes before you release, okay, or work on it. And finally, if you have produced it, then you must work on the deployment system, okay, so that it can run to take over the production system, etc. So we'll talk more about that, right? Even like recently, the news, okay, Lazada came up with Grab to offer same-day delivery, right? So nowadays, if you allow people buy things online, and what do they like is they like to have a very good experience of buying things online, which means what? When I buy things online, one of the things, okay, important thing is, can I get it fast? I don't want to buy something and then take like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, right? So, like for example, a lot of Singapore like to buy things on Shopee instead of AliExpress. Why? One of the reasons is because the delivery time take a long time. If you order things from AliExpress, Alibaba, Tmall, Taobao, which is from China, but it might take about 3-4 weeks for the products to deliver, right? Whereas if you buy something from Shopee, Lazada, Easy Buy, it might be faster, maybe 1 week, okay? And now even, okay, with this collaboration between the Lazada and the Grab, now they have this Grab Express to guarantee that, or even say on the same day delivery. If you order something in the morning, they will try to deliver you before night time, right? And how is that possible? How can you make this thing possible? Well, you got to do some automation, right? So there will be changes. Definitely will be changes with such collaborations, right? So you need to manage the drivers, the delivery guy, and even have to optimize, okay, optimize the route, okay, so that you don't go deliver to Jurong and then come back and then you have another delivery to Jurong again, right? So you're wasting the trip, right? So you need to optimize and ensure that also to ensure same day delivery, right? So this you definitely need some mobile application developments and also some kind of digital integrations, right? Otherwise, it is not possible. So you need this kind of IT system, and that will involve change, right? And you hope to deploy some of the change in a very controlled manner, not like what just now I mentioned, right? If you want to take the risk, you can do a big launch, a big bang approach, okay, where immediately you throw away the obsolete system and then use, okay, everybody go online. Okay, then what happens if the day that everybody go online, there is some problem, some IT, then you might not have a system to fall back on. So you hope to manage the change in a phase by phase, kind of a deployment, etc. So reason for change, there's plentiful of changes. Why is there always some changes? Either company is always on the lookout for cost effectiveness, reducing costs, so that they can increase the profits, right? So one way is to increase revenue, right? It's either you increase the sales, okay, or if the sales cannot be increased, it's already saturated, then how do you improve the profit? The only way is to bring the cost down, right? So if your revenue cannot go up any further because the market, the business is saturated, like the telco, the number of phone subscriber is almost saturated. Almost everyone have the phone, right? So how else can you reduce the cost? The only way is digital automations, okay, reduce the human manpower, right? So that will involve changes, cost reductions, or you want to provide service improvement, right? So like even restaurants, okay, they try to cut down on waitresses. Now everything you want to order food, if there's a tablet menu, or even a QR code. If you have a handphone, you can just scan and then the menu will be downloaded, and you can basically order them using your mobile phone. So that is also another service improvement, right? Or there is a certain problem with the current services and you need to change. So these are various reasons for changes in the way that you do, and that changes will involve a lot of this kind of a transition period, right? So
Incidentally, there is actually a role that is in charge for these service transitions. It's actually called the change manager. And his responsibility is to ensure that changes are carried out in an orderly manner, as well as to even to allocate priorities in terms of what are the changes, okay, that should be done first, and also to be able to collaborate with the person who raised the change, okay, such as the initiator for all the RFC, which is actually request for change. The change manager also has the responsibility to chair some of these change meeting, okay, to coordinate according to what is required, okay, and considering some of the new changes or the old changes, okay, that they need to actually consider the resources and the plan as what is required. It is in this CAP, or what we call the Change Advisory or Authorization Board, okay, where you have a group of people in the board to decide whether to go ahead with the changes, to authorize the changes, and how much changes is required, or even to decide on the prioritizations of such changes. And this board of people could include the change manager, who's the one who usually convenes everyone for the meeting, gathering the various important stakeholders such as the customer, the users, okay, the service level managers, the change configuration managers, right, and even the help desk people, right, to convene, to discuss, and to evaluate the necessity on changes. In the CAP meeting, they could be discussing on the new request for such changes, or could be to review, okay, why some of the change didn't carry out properly and prevent them from recurring. So it's somewhat like a bit like a after action review, but not so. But these are basically pertaining to making of changes, right? Reviewing of the request for changes and see whether they are worthwhile or they are cost effective, and do we have the enough resources to put in place to schedule for such changes, and even talk about how much to charge for some of these changes, as well as whether the changes can be implemented smoothly according to plan. A request can happen anytime, even during normal operations. And that doesn't mean that whenever there's a service request, it could be something that is a problem, right? Or there's a failure, right? So it could be a request simply just to respond to some incidents, some normal incidents. Request fulfillments usually happen quite often, and sometimes it could be low risk, low cost kind of service requests, such as even asking to reset a password, right? Or request for a loan of the laptop, or request for a software to be installed, and there could be some queries about some IT service help. As part of the good customer service, it's always important to even deal with every single request with courtesy, with effectiveness, and hopefully to be able to handle the fulfillment in the agreed upon time, right? As soon as possible. And it's always good to ensure that such requests for service are readily available all the time. That's why you have got this help desk hotline that should always be made available, okay, for people who need certain requests to be fulfilled. The business value for request fulfillment is tremendous because it ensures that business people or customers can get access to some of your standard services quickly, and that can also improve the productivities of the staff, okay, or the quality service that you can provide, right? And in order to reduce some of these different levels of approving or requesting, you have got this flat level where people can just simply call the hotline and make certain requests. So you can have a direct fulfillment, right? Immediate response. And that can also help in terms of reducing the cost of support, right? And be able to have better control of all the request services that are coming, right? Especially if you can centralize your fulfillment functionalities, right? So with service fulfillment, that will actually allow service help desk to better concentrate on some of the high priority incidents and thereby to separate them or even allocate the correct response team, okay, to be responsible for the respective service request. So how do we measure whether your request fulfillment are good? There you need to have KPI, key performance indicator, such as the reduced means of lapse time for handling, okay, how fast you handle a request, as well as the number of requests that can be completed within the target times, as well as increased percentage of request fulfillment that were properly being authorized. Other KPI could also include lesser number of incidents that is being reported, right? And there's also the KPI on increased users satisfactions when handling requests, right? And also to be able to clear some of the backlog, okay, with lesser outstanding requests. These are all key matrices that are important to measure whether your service request fulfillments are good. There can be possibly three types of changes: standard change, normal service request of changes, or emergency changes. Immediate response is required. And these changes are normally classified according to the level of risk, okay, that could come with the changes. The standard change are usually the low risk, okay, or changes that can be pre-authorized for such changes, and such changes happen quite frequently all the time and is pretty well understood or reported. Okay, so you can, when such as request for password changes, right? This can be pre-approved, and you can go ahead allow the users to mix or reset their password, right? As long as the users can be authenticated and they are the rightful owners. So the risk is low. Here are some of the standard changes, such as what I just mentioned, the password recovery, or even simple thing like request for additional laptop, okay, RAM memory, or increase, okay, the service memory when the servers are running kind of slow, right, and need to be beef up of its performance. So additional RAM server memory is required, and this will be pre-authorized, and you is justifiable for the expenditure and as well as to make such upgrade necessary, right, without affecting the operations. Or it could be patching of operating system, right, just like your daily patch up, okay, OS patch up that's required. These are important in terms of securities. Next, we have got the normal change request, and such requests could happen as planned, as per schedule, right, and sometimes authorizations is required, but usually the authorizations can be made upon quite rapidly by somebody who can actually make a quick decisions, right? And this can usually be carried out continuously, right, under automated pipelines for workflow. Example of such normal IT changes could be upgrading a older model servers to a new one, right? Or installations of a new applications for the whole companies, or even installing of new equipment, right, for the expansion of network. So such will require some form of authorizations, and usually such approval, okay, can be quite fast, okay, if it's justifiable. Then we have got the emergency change. Obviously, in this change, this has to be implemented and dealt with as soon as possible, right? It could mean a disruptions in the services, okay, if it's not dealt with immediately, and it has to be resolved, okay, as soon as possible. Proper authorization and assessment, okay, has to be expedited in order to ensure that such emergency request is being dealt with high priorities. Here is a simple workflow on how a normal service change request will carry out. It started off with the initializations of a request for change, right? And then people might revise it further before they review the final request for change, right? With this change request being brought up, people will basically review and evaluate such changes. Authorizations will have to be given before the final deployment or release that is given. Okay, and once the changes has been made, it will go through review again. Here is a typical change request form, right, that can be filled out. So there are many templates that you can actually follow through, and this is one of the form that you can tabulate, okay, to ensure that proper authorizations as well as the creator of the change is being documented properly. Usually for requests for change documentations has to be saved in a configuration management system like this, right? And you can expect that in the review of request for change, there should be a table that record the reason for acceptance as well as even reason for rejections of the change request. Here are some examples. In assessment for the request for changes, you need to prioritize and categorize the type of changes, such as normal, standard, or emergency changes. And you also have to put in the levels of risk involved, okay, for such changes, and who's going to approve the changes, the problems, and also the affected configuration items, okay, that happens, that need to be dealt with, that can be affected by the changes, has to be properly recorded and evaluated, right? Here is another example of a request for change, okay, that is being used by our school. Changes can be quite a hassle and can be quite a waste of resources. As such, you'll find that in KPI for change management, we try to ensure the minimum number of unauthorized changes, right? And the other KPI for change management is we try to make sure that any backlog of change requests is resolve as much as or implement as quickly as possible so as to minimize the amount of interruptions, right? Any unplanned changes should also be reduced, as well as any other remedies, okay, that can be evoked, that should also be minimized. How does change management links back to service value change activities? First, of course, you must make sure that any changes are planned properly. If not, they must also be executed properly also, right? And we want to ensure that for every changes, there should be an improvement in the processes or in terms of customer satisfactions, right? And as much as possible, any new changes, it should also be consulted with the user or customer so they don't get surprises and they are basically being consulted for. It is not surprising that some companies have to deal with many changes taking place every day, so they must find a way to be able to manage such changes. Here we have two different practices that can help to manage some of these changes. We have got the IT asset management as well as the service configuration management. What are IT asset management? IT asset here refers to computers, any electronic gadgets, routers, hubs, switches, etc. Companies are usually make up a lot of assets, and one of them is like this IT assets. So the companies might be able to find ways to manage such assets and be able to maximize their value and also to control costs, right? For example, a companies, okay, could be looking to buy 50 PCs, right? New PC for the companies. And as an IT asset manager, you might want to highlight that, hey, maybe we have got some extra PC somewhere, sitting somewhere collecting dust. Maybe we can reduce, okay, the number of PCs to purchase right? Instead of buying 50, you might just be able to buy 40. This is whereby you can provide some cost saving, okay, if you are able to manage your IT assets. In service configurations, this is about ensuring accurate and reliable information, okay, about configurations of the services and the configuration item. In configuration items here, we tend to refer to also the equipment like routers, switches, hubs, okay, and servers. And here specifically talk about how this configuration is being set up on these equipments or PCs, and what is the relationship between the different devices and how are they connect up. And some of these are being drawn out in a network diagram or topology, okay, and that also include on the server itself or the PC itself or the router itself. How is it being configured in order for the whole network to be up and running? And all these informations about the network diagram, the relational diagram, the setup configurations, okay, files, these are all saved in the service configuration database. These are all very important information to be captured, right? So that the next person will know exactly how the whole system are linked up, are connected, and are configured. So it's very important to ensure such management practices, okay, is introduced and upheld. So why do you need IT asset management or service configuration management? These are important because it helps you to support the services that is required. For example, if you were to run IT courses, do you know how many PC, what are the software that is required to be taught, to be used during the courses? Do you know whether do you need any other equipments such as projectors, okay, photostatic machines, printers, etc. So it all determines the amount of qualities as well as even compliances issues, right? So it's also important to know how many resources are actually available at your disposal. So once you have all these IT configuration and service asset management in place, it's easier to optimize your resources and to ensure that your configuration are properly set up. Service assets and configuration items is also about cost saving. It's about looking at the company assets so that you know exactly how many PCs you have, what are the software that you have, who are the people's or the capability that you have. Okay, so that you don't like for example to over purchase on the PCs, number of PC, or end up buying extra items, configuration items that are underutilized and then left to collect dust. Okay, all these are important. Okay, because with all these service asset management, configuration asset or item management, it might even help you to locate certain resources or assets easily, right? And you will also be able to know, okay, how many PCs are due for replacement and what are the software that are going to be expired, okay, at your fingerprint tips. So these are important information, useful information for decision making, right? Here we want to define service assets. It's more on the softer part where it deals more on the capabilities, the data, the application, the infrastructure that a company would have in order to fulfill certain services, right? That is required to fulfill that particular services for the customers. Configuration items tend to refer a bit more to the hardware components, okay, such as servers, routers, switches, printers, case, and PCs, and it contains a specific configuration instruction or files, okay, that you can configure, okay, the items. And configuration items sometimes comes with the attributes and relationship. So what are attributes? Attributes of a configuration item could be the the parameters of the electronic gadget. For example, if it's a PC, you might be talking about the 2 gigahertz processor, the internal RAM size, okay, and you might also talk about the software that goes with the equipment, right? The operating system. In terms of the configuration relationship, that will include how are the different devices or routers or server connected, okay, together, right? So there must be some relationship that ensure that devices between devices, they can talk to each other, they are all properly connected up and configured to work in sync. Here are more examples about the attributes of a configuration items or IT assets, right? So usually we talk about the brand, the model of the equipment, the types, okay, of the modem, okay, the serial number that we can put in place, the asset tag that we need to put in, that also include, okay, the status of the equipment, uh, whether it's obsolete, whether it's in use, or whether it's broken or spoiled. And the version number of the equipments are sometimes important. Here we talk about the relationship between the different equipments, okay, that are fit together to serve certain IT system, right? So we talk about the dependency, the way that is being connected using a wire or wireless or through other uh, connecting devices, okay, and who is maintaining, serviced by who, used by who, installed on when, right? So these are all relationship that has to be documents, well documents, okay, and saved into some configuration items, okay, so that things can be properly managed. And if you were to set up another system, you jolly well know how to set it up and configure it properly by looking at the service configuration documents. Here we have a monitoring system for a condominium, okay, where they basically capture the vehicles that comes into the condo as well as leaving the condo. It has got the camera who is able to do the optical character image recognitions to read the license plate number and then register or even save it into the security server system, right? So essentially it's just a diagram to show the different equipments that are being interconnected together. So this will be kind of like the network diagram or relational diagram of how the various equipments are interconnected together. Once the transition period is done, it then comes to the release and deployment, right? This is where you have to ensure there's a proper delivery and hand over the service operation, such as a clear, comprehensive release and deployment plan, as well as a release menu or training menu that can be transferred to whoever who's going to take over the system, right? And this is to ensure that one can deliver the agreed requirement and to ensure minimum impact and to have the maximum satisfaction for both stakeholders. The release package or menu could consist of a set of configuration items that need to be built, tested, deployed together in one release, right? And the planner should be able to take into account which are the release unit that should be put together in a package. So you have got a first release package, second release package, etc. So all the information has to be in and proper for that particular release. As in deployment, there are a few types of release options that you can provide. One, of course, is the big bang approach. The big bang approach is basically one wholesale, a new whole services is being deployed to all users, and everybody will have to use the same new system, okay, all together, right? In contrast, a phase kind of approach will be deploying the system in phases, okay, maybe in one of the branches, and only a few people are affected by the new system, and once the new systems are in place and working reliably and people are happy, then they will roll out to the rest of the other branches, right? So that is a phase release in contrast to big bang approach. Then of course there's also another release options that you can use, which is using the push method. This is where like you experience in some of the uh, software release or service patch update, where you can actually push, okay, to the staff, okay, for certain OS update, okay, or you can, okay, enable the pull options where you allow the user the freedom to pull the updates or information into their system as and when they are available or as and when they are ready to do the upgrade. So here I'm just giving you a summary table of all the various release design options that's available. The automatically way, okay, which is automatically being released, or the manual way where maybe you might need to send technical officers or specialists to go down to each of the laptop or machines to do the configuration update. Okay, so this is a bit more manual and tedious, right? Other than that, these are some of the other approach that we have discussed: the Big Bang, the phase approach, the push, okay, into persons or the routers to all broadcast to all the routers. Okay, make sure they are all updated, or using the pooling information where you give people the freedom, okay, the equipment, the freedom to basically find the convenient time for them to pull the updates or the new release, okay, into their machines. As in the KPI for release management, here we try to talk about the reductions in variance in terms of service performance. Okay, so as much as possible, we want to reduce the number of interruptions or incidents that is related to wrong deployment, inaccurate deployment of the component. So you have to ensure that the deployment of the system has to be planned, has to go smoothly, and it should cause minimum interruptions, okay, to the staff, to the users. Okay, so this could involve proper end user training, and also to prepare the end user for such release. Ultimately, it's very important to ensure all knowledge are being stored and captured properly, so that people will be able to retrieve some of this knowledge as and when required, right? This is to ensure that the continuous improvement process are in place, and the efficiency in providing feedback or services required, or to entertain any incidents that is occur, and through proper knowledge capturing, so that people will be able to have access to some of this know-how, okay, and to ensure that uh, reliable and accurate information is being passed on to the rest of the, even the maintenance team or even the help desk people. So it's very essential to ensure that you have an expert system or a knowledge-based system in place. So what we have gone through in this particular chapters on service transition is basically we talk about how some of the changes can be planned and managed properly so that you can introduce either new improvement or new services. And very important is to minimize the number of impact to the existing services or to the existing users. Right? Change management is important because that is to ensure that proper authorized change, okay, can be done in a controlled manner, as well as to be able to prioritize the changes, okay, that is needed. Okay, and we also talk about the various service asset management and configuration management, which are important to ensure that the changes that's involved, there are some cost saving, and the maintenance of the configuration records are all in proper place, so that next time any changes, similar changes that is required, people will know the exact, okay, configuration items, the exact setup, okay, that is required.